Hello, hello. I am here. So I'm just making sure everything's working. Hello. So good evening. Good evening. How is everyone this evening? I can see there's two people here. The mastermind. Hello. You're like always the first one to show up. I love that. I love that. You're like my number one. D videos. Hi, good to see you. I don't think we've met. What brings you here? Hello, Crispin. I don't think I've seen you either. So say hello. Let me know what has brought you in this direction. I'm glad to hear it. I am glad to hear it. How are we doing? I have treats for you guys. I've been experimenting with videos. So I've got a video about to come out that's really different from anything I've ever done before. So I cannot wait to see the reaction. I don't know if you like it or not. I hope you will. I've got another one planned. I'm so sorry then if I have I've forgotten the conversation. I'm really sorry. Good to see you again. Welcome back. Welcome back. Tell you what right now. Tell you what. What do you want to know, the mastermind? What is it you want to know? And I'll be very happy to tell you. D videos, you're here because you're currently in therapy with your narcissistic mother, and it's going as well as you'd expect. Oh dear. How is it going? Does not sound so great. What have I planned? Well, someone who I follow on YouTube, she's a musician, was accused of being a narcissist. So I made a reaction video to her being accused of being a narcissist, which actually just turned into a big, long explanation about what narcissism actually is. So I'm pretty confident the reaction to that video is going to be, actually, you're a narcissist and you're wrong about narcissism. So we shall see. But it's fun. And she did give me permission to do it. So it's fun. And you guys might like her music too. I might introduce you to a musician who has made her career on YouTube. Basically, that's how she promotes her music, is all through YouTube and then Patreon. So I'll be really interested to say that is so the right response. So the right response. So yeah, so that video is nearly ready to go. And then I'm guessing, see, I was talking to someone in the States, and hello, April and Kit and Glitter Sparkles on Instagram. I can't make your comments come up on the screen. So I'm sorry you didn't get a notification. So the other video I have planned, and I'm really excited about this one, and it might take me a couple of weeks to really get it together because it's a little bit more complicated than what I normally do, because it's not just me talking to a screen. Are you guys familiar at all with the British Post Office scandal? Just leave me a comment. Do you know anything about it? So, and I'm sorry you didn't get a notification in Visible Borderline, but I'm glad you're here anyway. And I've only been live for 4 minutes, so you really haven't missed anything. So how are you doing? It is good to see the same people popping up. It's always nice. So yeah. So are any of you familiar with the post office scandal? Yeah, I see. So D videos, you're in Ireland, so you know recently. It's in Ireland, do you have I should know this because I'm from the north. I'm guessing you're in the South. Um, do you have ITV over there? Um, because have you seen the drama, Mr. Bates in the Post Office? Your eyes glazed over with asking you if you'd heard of the post office scandal. Let me tell you, you'll not glaze over when I tell you what it is, because it is just the biggest, most it's one of those stories that if it was written as fiction, people would say that it's just an unbelievable story. Nothing like that could ever possibly happen. It's completely outrageous. So basically, um, the post office um, got a new computer system in the 90s. And the computer system essentially um, found these massive shortfalls in all of these little local post office branches. And the local people who ran the post office, the postmasters and the postmistresses, were responsible for paying for the shortfall. So they basically bankrupted all of these people, saying they owed them money. And as it turned out, the computer system was faulty, but not without over 100 people going to prison and several suicides and hundreds and hundreds of people being made bankrupt, losing their homes and their entire livelihoods to the post office. And it has only recently come to light in a big way. So I was going to look at it and break down the gaslighting involved in that process. And I think probably what I would see as a form of institutional narcissism, that we see these organizations as being above and beyond. And actually, as it turns out, they can get things badly, badly wrong. So I was going to break it down and we'll see how it goes. So it's just unbelievable story. So you do have ITV. I thought you did. I just didn't want to assume. It's you get it on catch up, because I didn't see it when it first came out, and then I was like, I've got to watch this. Everyone's talking about it. And I watched all 4 episodes in a row. I was just sat there like, no one disturb me now. I'm watching it. It's so good. It was so good. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do in the next week or so. So I have a question. How does autism affect the brain in a negative way? I'm not sure. Um, you know, autism isn't my area of expertise specifically. But I think, people with autism, our brains in us are wired differently. So things that people with autism find harder is empathy. It's not caring, it's just not being able to kind of put themselves in someone else's shoes, being able to make sense, being able to attune to people's emotions is kind of challenging in some ways. And sometimes as well, just like emotional expression can be difficult. So, and I think as well, autism is a broad sort of like there's so many different ways that it manifests. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but I'm also not sure I'm the best person to answer your question. Invisible borderline, listen. This is well known now in the UK. It has been accepted that this was a disaster of a situation. So I will not be saying anything that the UK government have not actually already admitted themselves. It is terrifying, terrifying. Just what people have gone through. It kind of, to me as well, it brings back sort of memories of things like the scandals, like the sexual abuse scandals in churches. Like we just don't imagine really terrible things can happen in these institutions that we trust, and yet they do all the time. It's actually much more common than we often would care to acknowledge. So, oh yeah, narcissism in business, it's brutal. And you would like to learn about it. Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I hope this as a scandal and as a story, I hope it spreads beyond the UK, because I think it's a really important story actually about how something like this can happen to ordinary people who were just hardworking, going about their daily business, and they completely get shafted by a very powerful organization that is completely convinced in its own rightness and unable to acknowledge that their new expensive computer system completely effed up in such a major way, and how they stood by the computer system, choosing to believe that it was more plausible that hundreds and hundreds of local post office owners were cooking the books and trying to rob money from essentially pensioners, which they had to pay back anyway. So why would they even do it? Um, that was more likely than the computer system being wrong. You know, it's incredible. So the mastermind, honestly, you put enough people in anything, they will corrupt it. I fear you may be right about that. I fear actually that is exactly true, that these kind of dynamics happen in all kinds of environments and all kinds of situations. So that's what I am planning to do. So I think you guys will find it kind of interesting and unbelievable. It is an unbelievable story. It really is. And I hope you enjoy it. So do we have any questions, comments, anything else we should talk about? I'm flicking between YouTube and Instagram a little bit. Invisible borderline. That would be a giant example of betrayal blindness. What's betrayal blindness? I'm curious what you mean by betrayal blindness. But yeah, it's an enormous betrayal. It's such a betrayal of people's trust and the inability to acknowledge you're doing it. Yeah, several scandals connected to charities over there in Ireland. Yeah, absolutely. You know, they happen everywhere. They happen everywhere, but I think some have come out in Ireland, actually, and some of them are just heartbreaking what people have been through. But also, the USPS isn't that far off with how they treat their employees, minus losing their houses. The mastermind, you will not believe what people went through. It is just staggering. Just staggering. You'll think USPS are angels. But what do USPS do? What do they do? So invisible borderline, betrayal blindness, knowing something is off, but choosing not to see it until it is really egregious. Do you think who's choosing not to see it? The person doing the betraying or the person being betrayed? I am kind of curious now about this whole concept. I want to see. I want to know. I want to know more about it. Because I think sometimes as well, like I've seen as well, that people can blind themselves to things that are going on around them because so it's the person being betrayed. Absolutely. And I think that is such a key dynamic in any kind of gaslighting that, if you think about it, you don't want to think that your partner is having affairs. You don't want to imagine that that's actually what's happening. And so you choose not to see things. You choose to overlook things. You choose to, if you believe in the relationship or you believe in your family, and the idea of losing it, the idea that it's actually there's lies within it is so painful that sometimes it's easier to not see it and to continue as things are. So I think that's really so common in many situations. But I also think in big organizations and trusted organizations like churches, like healthcare, like the post office, because who thinks the post office is a bad organization or capable of doing something really evil? We would choose not to see it. An interesting thing, I think, in the program that came out is that the post office staff, the people who were basically being accused, initially they genuinely thought they had made some error in accounting. They really thought the mistake was them. And many of them were paying paying back for a long time, remortgaging homes. I mean, it really took a long time before people started to realize what was actually happening. So, yeah, I think there is a real risk that we choose not to see things because it's painful to see it. There's a really good book about that, Willful Blindness. It is fascinating book. And she looks at lots of examples of where people have not seen the bleedingly obvious in retrospect, but how people didn't see it. So the mastermind with their employees, I guess you're talking about USPS. They do not care about them. They only care about the mail. Postmasters have messed with people's money, shaved money off to keep for themselves. Yeah, this wasn't what was happening here. Our postmasters were straight. They were innocent, completely innocent. Wow. So they've broken law. It doesn't sound great. So you guys, what would you guys like to talk about? Alex on Instagram, you just joined the chat but can't stay, but good to see you and good to see you too. Thank you for saying hello. Crispin, social enterprises can use and exploit volunteers and employees in the name of helping people. And then it's very difficult to say no because it's for the greater good. It's like, are you not here because you care about people? Aren't you here? Don't you think our work is worthwhile? So why do you want to go home on time? You know, why would you want a pay rise? You don't do this for the money, do you? We all here for the greater good, aren't we? Absolutely. You can see a lot of exploitation in charities. I think also, like, I've seen that in healthcare as well. Like, the kind of people are guilt tripped into staying because, you know, it's for the patients. And I think most healthcare staff do go above and beyond. But when it gets to the point where they're working themselves into the ground, in the end, that's not good for anybody. And yeah, I think you're right. When you have, I think that does come down to like different forms of institutional narcissism. And I think when you have a system, an organization that really sees itself as doing good in the world, they have that grandiose idea of themselves. That's when you open the doors to the real potential to exploit people and do terrible things and not realize you're doing it because you're like, well, it's for our great vision. We're just doing something really good for our community and for our society. So yeah, I've certainly seen that. And I think in those situations, it's really hard to, you know, to say no. And it is hard to hold your boundaries. Yeah. They expect you to work for part-time hours and volunteer extra days. Yeah. So yeah, all of the only comments I can put on screen are not from Instagram. I can only put YouTube comments on screen or Twitter. I think I can put Twitter comments on screen, but Twitter people don't seem to comment much. If you're watching on Twitter, say hello. Twitter or X as it's called now. It'll always be Twitter to me. Always. It's Twitter. So anything else we should talk about? I wonder if it's going to be a short one this evening. Sounds a lot like Scientology. I mean, Scientology and cults in general, they're the extreme form of it. That's like the most extreme form because they will get people doing all kinds of things for nothing, for free, for the organization because it's for good, it's for God, it's for whatever the cause may be. And then the level of, I mean, I think particularly in Scientology, the level of sleep deprivation and the control and the isolating people from others is just incredible. Plus the fact that they get all your juicy details. They like to know to get to know you so they have all the material to use against you. Yeah. So yeah, that's quite, I think it's a good parallel actually that Scientology is the extreme form, but the same dynamics of having this great vision that you think is so amazing, is so important, is so valuable, that you begin to potentially use that in a way that minimizes the effects on other people, potentially risks exploiting other people, or asks other people to do things that are just beyond what's reasonable to expect of a human being, or that denies that people who might be working for you or volunteering in your organization may have other things that they're concerned about. So, yeah. And then I think the sort of inspiring loyalty to the organization, I think that happens a lot in churches, probably also in healthcare, that, it's like, you don't want to hurt the organization. You don't want to, you don't want to undermine people's trust in the doctors, do you? I've certainly heard of that as well, where people are discouraged from um, kind of suing healthcare providers when there's been medical negligence, because you don't want to hurt the hospital. You don't want to hurt the health service, especially in the UK, because we have, and probably also in Ireland, because there's socialized healthcare. So you're expected to be grateful for it, and most of us are. But when things go wrong, I think there's a need to acknowledge when things go wrong and not to hide away from it. So Crispin, today your questions are here. Last time it was, I mean, obviously I don't know what questions are coming up if I can't see them, but I think any of the YouTube questions, so I use like software to do this, because if I just do it directly through YouTube, I can't put your comments on the screen. And I really like being able to put comments on screen. So you guys know what I'm talking about. But I think it would be really, what I can't do is I can't put Instagram comments on screen. And to see them, I actually have to flick into my Instagram window and see who's there, but it doesn't look like there's really very many people there. So, invisible borderline. Can you tell me what you mean by the normalcy bias? And Sophie, hello. We interact on Twitter. If you tell me what you mean by the normalcy bias, I will reply invisible borderline. So, hello, IPMO project. IPMO, how do you say your name? You're 64 years old. You've been inundated with narcissists my whole life. How do I escape the abuse? It's very difficult to give individual advice without knowing people's circumstances or situations, because it tends to be complicated. And, so I don't believe in giving one size fits all advice. But the general principle, I think, if you've been in a relationship, you really feel, or you've been in lots of relationships where you don't feel like, yourself, I think creating space, even if you can't leave the relationship, even if you can't get away from the people who were causing so much harm, to create some space where you just get to be you, and you just get to be around, ideally be around friendly people. Even if you don't know them very well, just getting away, creating a little space that's just for yourself, and is around normal, ordinary, warm people, is very sanity creating. It gives you that little bit of space, that little bit of breathing space, and it really helps you to start making better decisions. And obviously, if you're being abused and you're in danger, then I would also suggest speaking to, I don't know where you are in the world, but speaking to organizations that help people with domestic abuse, if necessary, the police. Just depends on the situation and where you are. But in general, I think that the really important thing for people who have experienced chronic abuse and chronically very hurtful relationships is to build that space away, to start to find yourself, to start to find things that interest you, to pay attention to yourself, what you like, what you dislike, to breathe a little bit, to have a little bit of fun, to get some fresh air, to touch grass, to just have that little bit of space that is just so sanity creating, and it gives you a fresh perspective, and just begins in a small way just to grow the new thing. Kind of see it as like the little seeds that you're beginning to plant, that will one day you'll reap the harvest from that. But sometimes it's in the little small things that you can do that really help you to start to create something different for yourself. So I hope that is helpful. And, if it's any consolation, I love working with people who are in their 60s because it's like I have worked with many people in their 50s and 60s and even beyond, where they, after a lifetime of very abusive relationships, abusive marriages, lots of emotional abuse, lots of coercive control, and they just find themselves for the first time. And it is a beautiful thing to see. It really is. It can be such a privilege to witness that. So I'm glad. I can see you said thank you. So you're very welcome, and I hope it's helpful. So hi, Sophie. So Crispin. Last time you asked about the difference between, oh, I do remember this conversation. And you think some places refer to personality disorders as attachment disorders. That's a terminology thing. Yeah, I think a lot of the time you know, there's a lot of similarity in concept, for sure. So invisible borderline. People only see what they expect to see. Can't fathom that things are bad or going bad, and it happens a lot in crisis scenarios. Yes, because it's too terrifying to look at the reality. And we can certainly blind ourselves to reality. If you are interested in that, Margaret Heffernan, Willful Blindness is such a good book, as is her TED Talk. Her TED Talk is on YouTube. Just put in Willful Blindness TED Talk, you'll find it. It's amazing and shocking, actually. I mean, she looks at it on an organizational level, but most of her book is about organizations. But I also think these things happen in relationships all the time. You choose not to see what is often very obvious, because there's something else getting in the way, and I've certainly seen that as well with people, like with a partner who's committed a terrible crime, or where there's multiple affairs going on, or where there's like a lot of substance abuse going on, and there's been a lot of secrets, and actually you think, how did you not see? Because in retrospect the signs are obvious. But I often think that it's often about just the horror of facing that, and it's a human thing, and I'm judging people in that situation, but there is a human thing to making it so hard to see the things that we don't expect to see or don't want to see. So Teresa, hello, welcome. So you enjoyed my conversation with Cluster B Milkshake. Sarah, yes. So watching her, you're able to have more compassion for my soon-to-be ex-narc. I know I cannot fix him. I can fix me and hold compassion for him. Exactly. And I really think that ability to hold compassion for someone can be very, very liberating. It's like, it's not about staying. It's not about repairing the relationship. You have to accept reality, right? But being able to leave without holding on to hatred or resentment or anger is incredibly life affirming for you, because what you really don't want to do is spend many, many years in anger and rage and resentment, and that build and build and build. And I understand why people are angry and resentful, for sure, and there's often good reason. But I think really being able to, for a lot of people, being able to hold compassion for someone whilst also not staying to fix them or to try to fix them, because that doesn't ever go well, is incredibly liberating. And I really hope that you are doing well. So I hope it all goes well for you, Teresa. So, is it possible to have both attachment disorder and a personality disorder? I mean, some would say that they're the same thing. I mean, attachment disorder is usually diagnosed in children, whereas personality disorder is diagnosed in adult. And I tend to think it's less about the diagnosis, and much more about how do you understand the difficulties someone has been experiencing, what their life experience have been, what their relationship experiences have been, and how that's coloring their patterns in relationships now. That's kind of where I would see it. Whether that's, you call that an attachment disorder or a personality disorder, kind of almost irrelevant. I think it's much more important with those kind of difficulties to kind of really have a feel for What is this person's experience of relationships? How has that affected the way they see themselves? How does that affect the way they see other people? How does it affect the way they relate to other people? And what effect does that have on their relationship? And how's that feeding into the way that they see themselves and the way they see other people? So I hope that answers your question. Is there a tendency for one PD to have a certain type of attachment disorder? Um, I'm not sure what the research would say on this. I certainly think you see different attachment styles tend to dominate. So, for example, someone with narcissistic personality disorder or narcissistic tendencies is probably going to have a mostly disorganized attachment, which is mean they're going to have bits of both avoidant and anxious, but they're probably going to lean more heavily towards the avoidant. Whereas someone with borderline or emotionally unstable personality is probably going to lean, probably also disorganized, but leaning a little more to the anxious. And I think, that yes, but I kind of think attachment is a helpful concept to a point. I just don't think it's the whole story. And I think it's helpful to think more widely than that, if that makes sense. Because I think, personality disorders are much more than just the attachment style. It's also about the way, really that core experience of a sense of self and relating in multiple relationships, not just very close relationships. And how does that affect the way someone approaches many things in their life, like their work, like money, like where they live and the choices they make. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Do you think it often boils down to money? Yes, I think that certainly is a factor a lot of the time. I'm guessing, Sophie, you're talking about what I was saying about the need for big organizations to be able to admit mistakes and to see that they're not always the good guy. They're not always in the right. Um, I think yes, but I think it boils down to more than money actually. Most of the time, I think money comes into it, but it's not the whole story. There's often an ideological conviction to an idea and a real sense of I believe myself to be doing good. We are doing good. How could anyone say anything bad about us? So you think about like the post office scandal, where the post office were like, we are the UK's most trusted institution and we have to protect the reputation of the post office. I think, yes, there's financial issues there, but I also think there was probably some genuine sense of the need to protect the reputation of the organization because that is so important and what that stands for and people's motivation for going into that. So I think that's certainly the case. I also think the same thing in healthcare. If you have this ideological commitment, you really think you're doing good for patients, you really think what you're doing, what you're promoting, the way you're treating people is the best thing for them, it's very, very difficult to accept that all of your good intentions may actually have caused harm. And that's such an affront to people's core values and core sense of themselves. That in many ways is kind of moral injury. And it takes a lot of courage to be willing to look at things like that, to be willing to say, as an organization, as a person, these things that I've held so dear, so precious, so important, and we've messed up. We've done such terrible things. So I think yes, there's money involved, but I personally don't think money is the whole story. And I think if we make it only about money, we'll miss the whole story. And I think ideological convictions are often more motivating than money, actually. I really do. So Crispin, attachment disorder is a big part of personality disorder. Lack of attunement, no object constancy causes relational, emotional, maladaptive behavior. Yes, absolutely. But it's only a part. It's only a part. I think there's more to it than that. And I think it's helpful to see. I mean, I suppose, people could say actually they're the same thing. But I think the concept of personality disorder goes a little further than the attachment literature does. So Teresa, the book that helped me so much is Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins. I will look that up. What was helpful about it? What was helpful? So If you're on Instagram, do say hello. Unfortunately, I can't put your comments on the screen if you're on Instagram, but I can if you pop over to YouTube. Yeah. Are there any other questions, comments, anything else we should talk about? Because it is always fun to talk to you guys. But if we're short on comments, I might well just okay. Go, go, ask your question. Be vain. You might get accused of being a narcissist for having vanity, but we're all friends here. I want to know your question. Now I'm waiting. I'm waiting for your question. The whole internet is waiting for your question, the mastermind. Come on. If anyone else has anything that they would like me to talk about, please do say now, because when the comments start to stop, I will wind up and say good night. Oh, wow, Teresa. What a big topic. So, this is how the book helped you, is how to let go of resentment, fear, guilt, shame. It was very freeing, yeah. And it helped to see my ex-nar as a human and bring forth compassion. Absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds like a really good book. I'm definitely gonna look it up. Sophie, you think that's absolutely right. There is a commentary on the wider financial attributes to life. Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't know what happened. I'm back. I am not familiar with it. Who do I recommend reading? On what? On what topic? On what topic? It sounds like David Hawkins' book's excellent, but I haven't heard of it. Um, there's actually not a great deal of really good stuff on personality disorders, particularly from a lay perspective. Um, like there's a really good book. It's quite basic and quite old, on CBT. I may actually be able to share it on the screen. Just a second. Let me see if I can share it with you. If I can find it, I will share it. Yeah. This is really good. I really like that book because it kind of goes through chapter by chapter on each of the personality disorders and what their sort of main kind of core beliefs are, and how that helps to, how that affects people, and how that, um, yeah, how it manifests, and what the underlying patterns, what beliefs are underlying the behavioral patterns that you see on the surface. So I really like that book as a kind of general overview of multiple personality disorders. On narcissistic personality disorder in particular, Wendy Behary, Disarming the Narcissist, although it's more written for people who are in relationships with a narcissist rather than someone who's narcissistic themselves. And Craig Malkin's book, Rethinking Narcissism, I think are both really excellent. So yeah, but you guys let me know as well. What have you found that you found helpful? But I've got some more questions. So let me have a look. How rare is it to have bipolar and NPD? Because I know some people here have NPD, but also have bipolar 1 with ADHD and NPD. There's not a lot of literature on having both, actually, to be honest, and particularly not outside of the kind of academic research literature. And even in research literature, there's not a lot on that. I would be very cautious about diagnosing NPD and bipolar disorder, because bipolar manic episodes, people will be grandiose. So you may see things that look like NPD, but they're actually manifestation of bipolar disorder. I mean, it is obviously it's possible to have both because they're completely different disorders. So, you can have a broken leg and a cold at the same time. So yes, but I don't know what the prevalence of that would be. And certainly ADHD is pretty common. So, a certain proportion of people with NPD would also have ADHD. And of course, I also kind of have my own theory about this around that. Yeah, I think maybe if you have ADHD, an underlying kind of neurodivergence, and you go through life with everybody telling you you're a loser, or that they're disappointed in you, or that you're not trying hard enough, or that you're not good enough, or you annoy people, that affects the way you see yourself, and that may increase your vulnerability towards certain personality disorders. So that's a possibility in certain environments. So I can't give you prevalence, but I think it's certainly possible. So let me know what you think. Invisible borderline, you're listening to the emotionally abusive relationship. That's another one I need to look up. I don't read enough these days. I just make YouTube videos. And I watch YouTube videos. I watch YouTube videos about how to make YouTube videos. Oh, yeah. There's, I one of the things I like about my channel in particular, one of the things I'm quite proud of, is that there are people with NPD here, and people who do not have NPD who have been experienced abuse by people who are narcissistic. And I am quite quietly impressed that I've been able to have both people on the same channel, and that you can have chats with both types of people in the same chat. And it's always been, certainly in the chat, it's always been very respectful. So, well done, everyone here. It really is. I think it's a good thing. So the Maslowman, you have all three, like ADHD, bipolar, and NPD. That's quite a combination. That is tricky. I hope you're getting good treatment and good mental health care, because the three of those together could be pretty explosive. So yeah, schema therapy was huge in helping you recover from narcissistic abuse, as well as address your own wounds. I'm so glad you got it. I'm so glad you got good therapy. It does make such a difference. Can you put a link to that? Which one? I will put, you mean the 3 books that I mentioned? I can put a link. So after we finish, I can put a link in the description or in the comments. I'll put links to all of those books. None of them are particular. I mean, the Cognitive Therapy of Personality Disorders book is quite expensive, but the Craig Malkin and Wendy Behery's book, they're not expensive. I think probably you should be able to pick them up for around $10 if you're in the US. Maybe a little more than that. They're not really expensive books at all. I'm so glad you come back here. I'm so glad. Absolutely, all wounded people, and there's no need to demonize. And I'm so pleased. So it wasn't until 3 years ago you started talking personality disorder after being in therapy for a while. Yeah, I think that's how it needs to be, especially if you've got something like bipolar, because it has such an extreme effect on people's moods and people's behaviors during episodes, that I think you have to be very careful before thinking about diagnosing personality disorders. But, of course, the other thing is that, you know, these big severe mental illnesses like bipolar disorder often emerge in adolescence, and that's also a key time where your personality is developing, and I think that can really affect people. Um, so yeah. Oh, I should have mentioned Mark Eatenson's book. It is also really good, and he is excellent. I love him. I love his book. I love his YouTube channel. I would love to collaborate with Mark. I really would. We have actually exchanged a couple of emails, but he is like super busy because he teaches at a university. So he's got a big teaching job. So he's really, really busy. But I would love to collaborate with him. And also, ping him, put him some messages on his channel and say, you should collaborate with Dr. Ruth. Give him a little prompting. 'Cause he's great. I love his videos. I love what he's doing. It's really good to see his content. He's very psychoanalytically inclined in a way that I'm not. Um, I'd love to see what would be interesting would be to get someone like Jacob or Sarah to interview both of us together, because I think you'd see maybe just you probably see a lot of similarities, but you probably also see some slight differences in style and approach. It would be really interesting. So yeah. You totally need to leave that in the comments on his channel. Like that, you need to leave that in the comments in his channel. That's gold. Oh my gosh. So Mark Eatonson is he's a psychologist, and he wrote a book called. Do you remember the name? Is it Unmasking Narcissism, or I'm not sure what. I can't remember the exact title of the book. It's something like Unmasking Narcissism. It's brilliant. So you have figured out. Yeah. So, but his YouTube channel is amazing, and he's put some just really good videos explaining different aspects of narcissistic personality disorder, and it's really good. And he's very, he's really warm. He's very compassionate. He's lovely. He's a really nice guy. I think. Like, you guys, seriously, you need to go on Mark's channel and say this in the comment section, like he's a young George Clooney. Because he gets so much hate in the comments. He's had to block a lot of people, as have I. But I think he's had even more than me, and probably because he gets more views than me. But he's had such horrible things said in the comments to him. Things like he's tolerating abuse, that he's justifying abusers, that he's on the side of the abuser, which is just not true. That is just not him at all. But go and put on his channel that he looks like a young George Clooney. That is like, everyone needs someone to say something like that about them sometime. It is. He's brilliant. I love his book. I love his channel. It's really, really nice. It's really good. You're welcome. You're welcome. Mastermind, you're welcome. Do you also look like a young George Clooney? I mean, that's what I want to know. Do you look like a young George Clooney? So stop normalizing violence. You're new. Hello, welcome. Could you explain the differences between a vulnerable narcissist and borderline personality disorder? There's comorbidity between narcissistic presentations and borderline presentations, for sure. And probably particularly with the more vulnerable narcissistic presentations. But so think about vulnerable. I don't think there's really like separate things like grandiose and vulnerable narcissism. I actually think they both exist together in the same person. But what you see is what happens is the presentation varies. The person may swing from feeling very grandiose to feeling very vulnerable. And in the vulnerable state, there's often a grandiosity within it, like my genius is unrecognized, or I am the greatest victim in the world. Nobody cares about me. I'm the most neglected person. I'm the most hurt person, the most sore person. So it does come from, with the more narcissistic presentation, it comes from a sense of being unrecognized, seen as unimportant, not being admired, not getting the recognition that you need and deserve. And that may be recognition for achievements and grandiosity and fantasticness and amazingness, but it can also be the recognition of your suffering, the recognition of how victimized you've been. That's the more narcissistic presentation. Whereas the borderline presentation is much more focused on feeling abandoned, feeling uncared for, feeling alone, fearing abandonment, and there's much more kind of emotional instability. So I don't know if that answers your question. So, but with the kind of narcissistic presentations, I think it's really helpful to think both the grandiosity and the vulnerability go together. So the person who's very grandiose on the surface, who's there showing off, kind of being a braggart, being boastful, being very proud and arrogant, that person underneath is often feeling intensely vulnerable, intensely inadequate, like a failure. And that's why they need all of that kind of recognition and acknowledgement. So the two exist in the same person, and you get the big swings between the two. And that's also why often you get the sort of very grandiose presentation of narcissist. In one setting, they're highly, highly grandiose, but in another, they can swing to being very vulnerable and doing lots of reassurance seeking with their partner, for example. So they might be the big, bold braggart at work, but at home, they may be very different. It's difficult to say. It's kind of what's underneath it. So feeling invisible or forgotten. Maybe are you invisible? Are you being forgotten? Are you in relationships where you're being quite neglected, for example? Because that may be the case. You know, I'm not really a fan of kind of just taking a symptom and slapping a label on it. I think there's much, much more to it than that. Um, certainly that can be an issue in borderline because of having this big fear of abandonment and never feeling like people really care about you and feeling like you've got to stop people from leaving you. That can be part of borderline, but it's not necessarily. Can also be it can also be an effect of being in a relationship with someone who's highly narcissistic, because if you're in a relationship with someone who's like really high in pathological narcissism, you may be invisible and forgotten regularly. That might actually be what you're experiencing. you know so I don't know if I've answered your question, but I don't think it's as simple as you just take one experience and slap a label on. So mastermind saying you wouldn't say just borderline, but a cluster B thing. It can be. I mean, certainly that experience, those kind of interpersonal difficulties common in personality disorders, in the cluster B personality disorders. But they're also human experiences. We all sometimes feel abandoned or neglected, and maybe we are actually being neglected. Maybe we do have a partner who's neglectful of us, or a parent or people who are close to us, for sure. The mastermind, you can jump in and say anytime. And you're very welcome. So you're welcome. I hope it is helpful. You guys, are there other questions or comments or anything we should talk about? Or otherwise, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to say good night. Sleep well. For those of you who are not in the UK, enjoy the rest of your day. And yeah, so that would make sense. If you have a history of being invalidated, that you would potentially then be more vulnerable to feeling invalidated or neglected in future relationships. Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is so kind of you to say. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm glad you're finding it helpful. And I will hopefully see you guys. I'm going to try to do a live next week, but I'm not 100% sure because my kid has a competition. She does gymnastics. She's very good at it. And she has her first big regional competition. So I don't know for sure what time I'm going to be back at. But if I am back, I will be here. And if I'm not back, I'll put a comment in the community and I will see you the week after, but I will hopefully be here next week. And in the meantime, good night, and see you all soon. Thank you so much for being here. And someone go on Mark's channel and tell him he looks like George Clooney. I will see you soon. Hold that thought, Crispin. I will come back to it next time. Good night.